Here we're going to start with one of the basics of Photoshop, and that's to combine multiple images together to make a new picture. Did a Creative Commons image search, and it came up with this background. So I'm going to right click and copy image. In Photoshop, if you do a new file with an image copied, the clipboard selection will make it match what you've copied exactly. So that when you go paste, doing edit paste or Control V, it will match your background size exactly. I also found this image to use, so I'm going to right click, copy that image. And I'm going to paste him the same way, so that's edit paste. You'll see that he has his own layer above the layer of the background. Now I'm going to want to remove this background image. There's a few ways of doing that. In this particular situation, the fourth tool, which is Object Selection, Quick Selection, and Magic Wand, is going to be your best bet. Using Quick Selection, you can just click and drag around the black area, and that will mostly select it. Now, depending on how you do it, it might go over it. Like here, it went over his arm, so if I deleted the background, you'll see I also lose an arm, so that's not what I want. But I think that both the Magic Wand and Object Selection would work better in this case. So I'm going to show Magic Wand first. So Magic Wand works by selecting any color that matches the tolerance up at the top. So if I click on black, anything up to 16 colors away, which is not very much, it's going to be selected. So if I click here, you'll see it does an edge just there and only selects the black part. I can delete that, do the same thing on the bottom, and that's basically finished. But for some of you, that may not work as well as using the Object Selection tool. The Object Selection tool, you can mouse over an object, you can kind of see what it's going to select. So in this case, it works almost perfectly. If I delete it, just deletes that character. Sometimes it may only select the head or the body, and you have to hold shift to get them both, and sometimes it doesn't really work at all. But in this case, it worked out great for me. So what I want to do is select my character, which I did, and then I'm going to invert my selection. So do select inverse, and that will select everything that's the opposite. So when I press delete, it will delete the black part only. Let me undo and show you. The one last way that works for a lot of people is sometimes when the select sees multiple body parts as different objects, you can do select subject, and it will try and select that whole thing. It doesn't work perfectly on this image. It's mostly good, except you'll see it misses this part in the black, and for some reason it leaves part of his arm behind. So if I were to invert that and delete, we'll see that it leaves this black part and I lose part of his arm. So instead we'll select him, invert, and delete, and that looks pretty good. Using the Move tool, I can move my shape around. To modify it, I probably want to use the Free Transform tool. So I go to Edit, Free Transform, which is Control T, and I can use that to resize, or if I go outside of a corner, rotate my shape however I'd like. By default, it makes all of the resizes proportionally. If I hold Shift, it makes it so that it doesn't have to be proportionally. If I hold Alt, it does the transformation from the middle instead of where I'm holding. And then if you hold Control, it only moves that one corner instead of the whole thing. So I'm going to resize him to about where I want and place him on the ground. Then I can apply that by choosing something else and clicking or pressing Enter. If you need to modify it in a different way, exactly, you can go to Edit, Transform, and then that's where you can find Rotate, like if you need to rotate him 180 degrees, or you can do Edit, Transform, Flip. So if I wanted him to face the left, I would do Flip Horizontal, and he'd face the other way instead. But I think he works well this way in this picture. And I'm also going to add this hat to him. So I'm going to do Copy Image, and then I will paste that on top of him. I need to erase the white part, so I'm going to go to my Object Select, select the hat, Looks like it did a pretty good job, so I'm going to invert and delete. Kind of want it the other way, so I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal, and then I'm going to rotate it some. So I'm going to go to Edit, Free Transform, so I can rotate it to, say, that angle. That looks pretty good. I think the size is about right. If you wanted it to be larger, just drag from one of the corners to increase it, or drag down to decrease it. Then press Enter to apply. Now I'm going to combine the hat and the dinosaur into one shape, because right now if I move something, they get disconnected, and that would not be good. So I'm going to go up to layer 3, which is the hat, and I'm going to do merge down. Now these two layers have been combined, so they're now one picture. So the pixels that were underneath the hat and part of his head are gone, and they've been replaced by the hat pixels. Now one way he doesn't fit in this picture is that he doesn't have a shadow like everything else does. So to do that, I'm going to duplicate his layer. Name it shadow. That way the shadow will be made out of everything he has. So that'll include his arms, his legs, his tail, and his hat. Then I'm going to go to the paint bucket. So you might have to click and hold on the gradient tool to get to the paint bucket. Choose a gray color. So I can go with this charcoal gray color for his shadow. And then I'm going to click on it, and it should fill the whole thing in. If not, you might need to change your tolerance to a higher number. I made mine 255, which will be every color. So this will fill in every pixel with that color I chose. Now, this isn't where his shadow needs to be. It needs to be down on the ground. So I'm going to go to Edit, Free Transform, and then I'm going to just move the corners using Control. So I'm going to hold down on Control, and I'm going to modify just the corners. So see the angle that this is going on this tree? I kind of want to match that, so I need to go pretty extreme with this angle. That seems to be matching it pretty well. I'll probably have to move the bottom ones to make his feet line up. That looks about okay. I'm going to drag that below his layer so that that's behind. Now that those kind of match up, it looks a little better. Now, most of the shadows, well, all of them except for the one we just made, you can see stuff through the shadow. They're not perfectly opaque like this, covering everything up. So I'm going to fix that by, on my shadow layer, changing the opacity, and I'm going to lower that until it looks about the same as the rest of them. So that's too dark. That's lighter than this is, so I need somewhere in the middle. That seems like it's about okay. Now you'll see here there's a real hard line, whereas these other shadows are kind of softer. And that's because the light, when it goes around something, is kind of bent a little bit, so you get a blurry line the farther a shadow is away. So to fix that on this guy, I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And these aren't very blurry, so I don't want like a huge number. Like 4 is probably too much for this picture, because that's a much softer shadow than, say, this is. So I probably just want something like 1, or in some pictures you might even have to do like 0.5 for it to look right. And actually 0.6 looks pretty close to the same amount of blur there. So I'm going to leave that, hit OK. Now the only other thing is that these shadows look a little bit browner, and this one looks a little bit grayer, so I need to modify that color a little bit. So I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation. Now since I made the shadow all one color, doing a colorize on it will work pretty well, and actually that's not bad. That's pretty close. Saturation is how much color, so I don't want that much, so maybe even just bump that down a little, and then you can change what hue. So like this would make it greener, this would make it redder. So just kind of mess with that till it matches the other one, maybe a little bit darker to match that shadow. And I think that looks pretty good, so I can hit OK. And now my image is complete. Now to save this, what I would do is I'd go to File, Save As, and I'd save my Photoshop file in my Creative Clouds folder. I made a Photoshop folder. I'll just call this Dino Scene. Hit OK to save that Photoshop file. To turn into Canvas, I'm going to want to make a PNG file. So I'm going to go to File, Save a Copy, and for type, I'm going to choose PNG, and then hit Save to save my Dino Scene. I want to do the smallest file size. It's going to go really fast anyway. So hit OK, and you'll see that it saves down here in the bottom, and then it is finished. The way I would turn this in Canvas is click Start Assignment, choose Upload File, then choose File, go to my Creative Cloud files, probably easiest with large icons on, go to my Photoshop folder, see there's my Dino Scene image, open it, and then I can submit that assignment.